Thank you, Glenys. All right, we will reconvene, and for people who have arrived or watching online, we've probably got 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, to continue with the hearing that we started this morning before we start on the significant areas the areas of significance to Maori hearing. And we've given some consideration, is there the opportunity of actually expressing a view on any matter. And over the 30 minutes that we had for lunch, the answer is no. We actually want to see the case law that's been referred to this morning to help us form a view on several of the issues that we've heard. So hopefully that will be passed on. Yeah. But we highlighted 1:30 and we're questioning the council people. Heading back to the planning evidence, it's a matter of going through questions in relation to that. So, Maria, you had one more, was it? Or no more? Okay. So, Victoria, there's a couple of things I just want to take you through in terms of many of the issues that we've talked about this morning. We probably don't need a lot more guidance on. I think there's a clear message from NZTA that they will be comfortable with considering proposals for another access on to the state highway, and various provisions need to be tidied up in relation to that. When it comes to the upgrading of the access, I'd highlighted that I see it as probably a legal issue in terms of council's ability to require an upgrade of a state highway that isn't directly linking to the access to this site. From your planning perspective, is there anything else you want to add?
If you bear with me a second, sorry, they're just mowing next door to me. I'm just going to shut the door, bear with me.
Do we need the speaker turned?
Apologies, it just started right now. I don't think so. I've made the points already around the trigger points and how I'm concerned about the workability of that. We have, in the Gore South development area, we did carefully consider accesses at that point, and a similar approach might be suitable for the McNab area. I think it's just important to have a standard that is workable and clear, but also that doesn't put too much onus on one party, which could have the effect of actually stymieing development if it's uneconomic to upgrade the access. And I know through the industrial zones hearings we talked about, financial contributions, development contribution options. And I think really the same sort of considerations that we considered in relation to the accesses as part of the Gore South development area are quite relevant here.
And we'll get some feedback on that in a moment. Can I go to page 56 of your report? And is the numbering of the provisions you've got there in the central column and the right-hand column out of sync, or have I missed something?
Sorry, are you referring to where I've got GRAS R8 and then GRAS R9?
Yes. So you've got 12 to 15 in the centre column, 8 to 11 in the right-hand column, and similar mismatching for the one below. Are they intended to be the same?
No, it's because I haven't included, so there's a number of conditions that I haven't included that would fit above that. So you can see where I've got those dots. those would be the sort of 1 to 7 in relation to GRUS R9, which is why we've continued on at 8.
Okay.
Below. It's just so that when you're referring to the rule, you don't have, because it's essentially one rule but covering 2 separate areas. If we started again at 1 in relation to the McNab Rural Precinct, then you'd have 2 GRUS R9 ones.
Thank you. I follow now. Everything else I've got here, I think we've talked about sufficiently this morning, so I've got no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Which helps us along our way. Now, is that your case, or is there anything else you wish to add?
Sorry, first of all, I just have to apologise. I thought we only had half an hour after lunch, which was why I was a little bit more concerned than I was, but looked at the timetable during the break and saw we had an hour. So, yes, and there's nothing more to add except for the next step from here, which may need, I'd appreciate the chance to comment on, but I don't want to jump into that now. I'd rather just hand over to my friend.
We'll have that conversation after we're here.
Thank you.
And just to reiterate the comment before you came back in, that we're not in a position to comment on give direction on anything with such a short break, and we're keen to actually see the case law you referred to actually help us on our way as well, particularly when it comes to some of the questions that Commissioner Bartlett was asking.
No, that's a helpful steer, and just to signal perhaps where I see things going from here, if the panel's minded, and I've had a very high-level initial chat with my friend about this, but there's some points that I will respond to now, and you've made some helpful questions, so I can work through those. I think there's some points which would benefit from a bit of time to allow for some redrafting responses in particular. So I see a step after this being a provision of more material from the submitter step, not new material, responding to what's come up at the hearing. So just to signal now that I don't propose to cover everything in the next 15 minutes, nor does Ms McMillan. There's a few planning questions as well, but I'd seek leave to file by the end of the year, say, a response to some of the points that have come up at the hearing, and include in that an updated provision package from the submitter's perspective.
And very conveniently, with regard to what rules are in force, etc., it would probably point that we'd be looking at the wrap-up hearing as any opportunity that was required to actually reconvene the hearing. So we won't finish the hearing today, it'll be adjourned. With that in mind, I think is the way forward.
I think that would be useful, and I'm not sure if the council would want to respond in writing to anything we filed, but that I would be happy with that, or we could deal with that at the wrap-up hearing, but we can work through that.
Mindful that you've got 100 tonnes of paper already, we would probably want to just have a quick response, but would be trying to make it as short as possible. And I would like to put in writing the submission I made around what date you apply the law, because I think it will be useful for you moving forward as well.
To avoid the need to issue a minute, it would be good if there's agreement that we'll get all that before the Christmas break.
You know, that's fine from my perspective as well. Thank you.
Could you assist?
Oh, sorry.
Could you assist before the
that.
Christmas break? Have you got pressures before
Sorry,
the
could you just repeat that? You just broke up.
Can you help with reviewing any further information before the Christmas break?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Well, should I just jump into my interpretation of your questions, and we can go from there. Thank you, and a few other points that have come up. One, just in no particular order, starting with the rule around the immediate upgrade being at the to the satisfaction of NZTA. You've asked a question around that. On reflection, I agree, and that given the need for a rule to be clear and enforceable by the council and not contain any subjectivity, I can see also from the exchange with NZTA that as drafted needs some work to ensure that there isn't an element of subjectivity and discretion to the interpretation of that standard too. Ms McMillan and I had a very quick chat at lunch around a potential alternative, and the council have put some text in the 42A addendum as well. We haven't landed on the solution, but can see the benefit in a potential controlled activity type trigger, just with the proviso, or not the proviso, but with a very clear signal as to what the matter of control is, to not create inefficiency either for council or for McNab, that it's a very pointed matter of control regarding access. It's potentially helpfully would also address this future traffic assessment point, because it could get captured by the same mechanism. And at the same time, and Mr. Bartlett sent me some traffic movement numbers at the entrance, but I don't really propose to try and interpret those on the fly and give you my view on them, because I think that would be dangerous. So I'll loop that into that work. But just to signal where we're heading, I agree that there's some legality issues around that condition. It was added as a direct response to concerns of NZTA, but I think we can address their concerns whilst providing a more appropriately worded planning response. So we would propose to loop that into the update to the McNab version of the provisions, which we will file. And that will fundamentally mean that a council processing planner can assess the existence or not of that access and any need for future accesses from there.
Would you be considering the 30% as well?
Yeah, yes, that's right. And my sort of pure legal, what's the clearest way for response is maybe it's better to have it as a bit like a high traffic generator type rule rather than an area of development type rule. But I need to get some advice from Mr. Bartlett and Ms. McMillan on that. But I think that will be clearer. So we've definitely heard the tone of the questions on that, and I understand them. There was a question about the transport yard and its current existence, and I think there's a practical response to that and a legal one. I've had a chat to Shona. Although we've been calling it a transport yard, it's really a farm service yard. It's not an operating transport yard at the moment. So its relevance is that it's just there in the environment. And I think my friend might have said that her submission to you was it doesn't have particular, well, it's not material perhaps, or words to that effect. And I do share that view. I don't think you should support that location just solely on the fact that there's already buildings and some activity there. But there are other reasons that McNab seek that be rezoned. But there is no current consented or operating traffic logistics type yard there. We're going to provide the spatial plan map that I had referenced in legal submissions. We've had a look at the Apatihono Tatihono assessment again over lunch, and Ms. McMillan's going to respond to that in when we either maybe briefly today, but we'll put a response in writing. And I think there's a key point there about viewpoints that I think we could look at in terms of the provisions. So that's an output that's come out of that discussion. Concept plans and stormwater. Again, Ms. McMillan will speak to this. I think we both conceptually can see the benefit of a concept plan. We need to do more thinking about how that can be incorporated into a consenting trigger or a future work program added in an appropriate way through the district plan. But just to signal we can see the benefit of that to provide some certainty over some of these activities, and we'll look into that further.
With your acceptance of that, that also brings into play wanting to get some feedback from you as to whether the development area tool might be useful to get the outcomes you're looking for.
Yes, yeah, no, that's helpful, and I think it probably is captured by the same. We can see the benefits of that as a tool, as a more targeted tool, to achieve some of the outcomes that are intended anyway, but we acknowledge aren't sitting in the relief. So I'll just make a note of that. Yeah. Briefly on scope, and I don't want to labour the point on scope that you've got my full submissions, you've heard from my friend. The one point in reply really to my friend's submissions on scope is that I think that the scheme plan or the zoning plan attached to the submission is a really important aspect of our scope argument, because it forms part of the submission. Although the submission relates to specific relief about other zones, I disagree that it means light industrial isn't on this plan change. That the scheme plan sought a rezoning of different zones, and it sought different mechanisms to achieve those outcomes. And I think that means all of these options are on the table for your consideration. And really on scope, I would, in my submission, come back to the table that Councillor Zoe Havel had made, and I've got a larger version of my own here about what are the activities that submission, that scheme plan attached to the submission enabled versus the activities enabled in Ms McMillan's version. And to me, they're very aligned, and I think that goes a long way to addressing the scope point. Noting the lot size aspect, which we say we've addressed through that minimum lot size. But I think the focus on those activities is really useful to address it or to responding to the scope point. I think another point that is useful on the scope is that when I read the objectives and policies supported by the council team on the rural provisions, they don't read very differently to the objectives and policies fundamentally that are supported by the McNab team. And I think that also helps address your scope point, and that the outcomes enabled are actually very, very similar. And I say that if the approach of the council is within scope, then it would flow that the approach of the McNab team is within scope. And on that idea, look to outcomes rather than methods would be my submission on that point. Just quickly, they were my notes to respond to the questions you posed, but I'm happy to take further questions, of course, if I haven't covered them off.
I have a question for you, and there's several options, but two of the options are limited industrial and general rural zone, and but there are differences in lot size. It's quite distinct. And what would you say about people who might consider light industrial as too concentrated in that area and would favour a bigger lot size? Is there potential that you may address the lot size in light industrial?
Yep, no, that's a good question, and I'll just go back to the submission. So I think there's two responses to that really. One is that the submission version sought light industrial with no change to subdivision minimum lot size on the entire NZTA frontage. So any submitter, any participant in this process would have been aware of that. It's there in the scheme plan. But I think the more important response to your question is to anyone who may have looked at that submission version with the McNab overlay over the rural zone. I think the outcome they would have sought can be achieved by this addition of a 1 hectare minimum lot size through the amended relief. To my submission, that addresses that point. That achieves an outcome that the submission version would have been anticipating. So I don't think the outcome would be out of step, or someone might have participated had they known any other outcome. So I think that's a really important addition to the relief, that 1 hectare minimum lot size.
And you consider 1 hectare large enough?
Well, the reality, the instructions I've got from my client is that the demand is actually for much larger lots. We feel 1 hectare is about right to respond to the environment, and there's always a consenting pathway there, which would need to look to the objective and policy framework, but I think 1 hectare gets that balance about right.
But it is quite different than 8 hectares. So
It is different to 8 hectares, but it's a lot larger than what the minimum lot size of the submission version of that light industrial, for example, would have sought. But yeah, I acknowledge it's less than 8 hectares, yeah. Oh, sorry, one more, and it's not on that point, it's just what I remember, I didn't address it, and it's maybe just my eyes, but I just wanted to reiterate that the area we're calling the transport yard, it has always had the same, through the submission version, the same rural industry overlay over it. And I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, because the colours to my eyes are very similar, but it was sought identical to the rest of that area.
If you're finished, I don't think we've got any other questions of you. We'll hear from Christine McMillan.
Thank you. I almost forgot about Christine, which was not bad of me. I'll pass to Christine. As I say, Christine's got some initial thoughts and some homework suggestions as well.
So I think, as Josh said, I think for the main part we need to come back with a more comprehensive set of provisions to deal and policies to deal with the points raised. I quite like some of the suggestions, particularly from your Commissioner, on the policy direction and even some of the activity status around the supporting primary production rather than having a rural industry focus. And I think that's a good suggestion, and we'll just work through how that will look in the provisions. Excuse me. And the same with the concept plan, how we can, whether that works well with what we're intending, and how we can fit that within the provisions of the plan. You asked about the Southland Regional Policy Statement and the urban objectives and policies, and I've had a look at those since, and yeah, in my opinion, we fit well within those in general accordance with those objectives and policies, particularly for objective URB.1, which is generally for industrial development as an integrated, sustainable and well-planned manner. And provides positive environmental, social and economic and cultural outcomes. And I think through the policy direction particularly, we've achieved that direction. And then for policy URB.1, the same sort of thing, avoids adverse effects on the environment or remedies or mitigates. And I think through the green engineering that we're pushing for with this development, and yeah, that we'll achieve that sort of direction through the regional policy statement. I can provide a more full assessment if you'd like in the formal response. Yep.
I think that'll be important because we don't have it coming through anywhere else at the moment.
Yes. Also, Josh has already talked about the control activity status, and we'll look at the trigger, like I said. I don't think there's anything much more for me to address right now. Apiti Hono assessment. So I think we'll probably need to take some direction from Hokonui Runanga on this, but in looking at the view shaft plan that was in part of that assessment, one of the view shafts is off to the west, so sits away from the industrial area across the rural lifestyle zone. The other one appears to me, which is a pretty eye estimate, to be skirting the edge of the light industrial zone. So generally, we're sitting away from the light industrial zone with those view shafts, maybe just a slight overlap in a couple of places. I would say that the height controls are the same for the general rural zone as they are for the light industrial zone, so there's no change there. So you could effectively build the same height building in either zone, in either precinct. And the provision of the 20-metre setback that we've proposed will also provide some mitigation of any sightline view shaft breaches. I think that is all I can probably cover off from memory, the issues you've raised this morning, but yeah, let me know if there's something else that I've missed. Otherwise, we'll come back in full.
I think one of the points that was raised by Council this morning is the absence of a Section 32AA assessment of what is in your supplementary final evidence.
Yeah.
So I think you should be given an opportunity to rectify that if you wish.
Sure, I won't go into too much detail.
The Apiti Hono question I had about height was that the point raised in that was that there should be low-level urban design. So my point was that I had anticipated, even for the rural lifestyle zone, that the height of buildings allowed would be less in that area than elsewhere in the zone because of the need to protect the views.
Yeah, we can probably take some direction from Hokonui Runanga on that, I think. But yeah, take your point. But, I think that probably, just to add in there, I think once again the Mahinga Kai overlay provides that separation, and then basically a massively long height recession plane to the boundary of the Maori purpose zone, and the same on the setback on the light industrial rural industry precinct, whatever we're going to end up there.
And in referring to the Mahinga Kai area, a development plan would actually enable that to be readily identified, whereas the ability to otherwise identify it in the plan, etc., is probably a bit more constrained.
Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, but we'll consider that.
So I think that's all that we need to deal with today. In terms of the parties will submit anything that they want to follow up on in terms of giving us a written response, feedback from the council, as well as feedback on those points. I think the earlier you're able to electronically give us those, the case law would be good from both sides, please, both from Council McNabb.
That's fine. I think it may have got to the council's inbox while we've been talking. So, yeah. And just to signal with. We'll aim for the 19th of December to provide the additional information, and if my friend's comfortable, I don't think you need to do a minute, but perhaps once you've received that, you can consider next steps.
Yeah, and a key reason for having the hearing now rather than in March is what was being talked about, because I think it's actually come to fruition. I anticipate we will be coming back with a formal minute once we've clarified our thinking.
Yes, no, that absolutely. Hopefully I save you a minute just immediately after this hearing, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a few others to do as well.
I understand it, yeah.
Okay, so thank you to both McNabb and the Council for the input here this morning and the way that it's been dealt with. So I will adjourn the hearing. We've got Victoria putting a hand up. Yes.
Commissioner Havel, could I just jump in for a second? Sorry, Mr. Lucky mentioned the 19th of December. Are you expecting, was that for the submitter to get their information together? Would you still be expecting a council response before Christmas? Because that's a little bit
Well, we've
But Josh and I can arrange this in the background, so I'll let you know, Victoria. If save, as you say, save you issuing directions and doing a minute, we can agree, and then we'll make sure that we give the hearings admin team good signal of when the documents are coming. I'm mindful that the council offices close on the 20th, so that's part of the equation that we'll have to factor in as well.
right. Thank you. So I shall adjourn the hearing, and we will take a 5-minute break so that we can change the witnesses that we're talking to for the next hearing, and the hearings panel can hop out back and get the papers that we need for the next hearing. Thank you very much. So we're adjourned for 5 minutes.